God bless you. I'm Dr. Kenneth Samuel, pastor of Victory for the World Church, and I'd like to welcome you to our continuing Bible study series on the book of Genesis. We're starting a little late tonight because we had to navigate some changes through StreamYard, which is the platform that we use for this Bible study. But we were able to navigate them. It just took us a little longer. So thankful for Bible study on tonight, and so delighted that many of you can join us and be a part of Bible study on this evening. So to God be the glory. Let's begin with prayer. Gracious God, for another day, we give you praise. We ask now for your spirit of understanding, that as we read your word, that we will not just read words, but God, that we will read experiences, that we will read about how faith operates in the lives of people who trust you. And God, we pray that our reading and our study and our discussion will allow us to make the proper and necessary applications that we need to make in our own lives of your living word, so that we can indeed be more like the Christ whom we love and adore. We honor you and we bless you in Jesus' name. Amen. So tonight we come to Genesis 39. The last time we were together, which was 2 Wednesdays ago. I want to thank God for Minister Kimberly, who stood in for me on last Wednesday while I was out. But on tonight, we come to Genesis 39 after having discussed 2 Wednesdays ago that debacle. You know, I like words, I like vocabulary. So I think that's a good way to describe what happened between Judah and his daughter-in-law in terms of their tryst that they had. Her name was Tamar. He said his, and then just start following up. Tamar, yes, Tamar. So that debacle between Judah and Tamar is what we discussed in Genesis 38. Tonight we move to Genesis 39, and here we're going to pick up the narrative of Joseph and his exploits in Egypt. We have already discussed how and why Joseph was sold by his older 10 brothers into slavery or into the service of Egyptian, of really Middle Eastern traders. And we talked about the jealousy that his brothers had toward him in regard to his revelation of his visions. And so now we come to his experience in Egypt, having been sold by his brothers. So let's pick it up from Genesis 39 and verse 1. And I'm reading from the New Living Translation of the Bible. So please follow along with me, or better yet, have your Bible open with me so we can read and consider this text together. Genesis 39 is where we are. Starting at verse 1, I'm reading from the New Living Translation of the Bible. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Officer was captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. A few things here. Number one, Pharaoh is not a name. Pharaoh is a title. So when we talk about Pharaoh, we're talking about the title. In particular, Pharaoh means king. It's the Egyptian word for king. So as we would say, King Charles, if Charles were the king of Egypt back in the day, he would be called a pharaoh. A pharaoh is an Egyptian king. So Joseph is sold to Potiphar, who is in charge of the guard for Pharaoh. So he's very, very high up. It's kind of like somebody who is in charge of maybe the Secret Service for the president. That's a very key position. It's a very prestigious position at that. because that person has access to a lot of power, not to mention access to the leader of the country, the political leader of the country. So Potiphar's purchase of Joseph um, is telling, because it lets us know that Potiphar had means, he had money, he was high up in terms of rank. He was not just an everyday worker. This was a person of position and power and prominence, and probably somebody who could afford to purchase Joseph. By the way, Joseph would have fetched a premium price, and I hate to talk about people in terms of being for sale, but that's what's going on here. Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers, who did profit monetarily from it rather than kill him. And once he gets down into Egypt, the traders who bought him from his brothers now sell him to Potiphar. And Potiphar has the money and the means to purchase Joseph. Joseph would have been premium because, number one, he's a young man, which means he's able and fit to work. And Joseph was. Joseph is believed to be about 17 years old at this time. So he is, strong, robust, energetic, and a 17-year-old can provide a lot of service, a lot of labor for anyone who can afford to purchase him. And in this particular case, it was Potiphar. Now, let me talk about this in terms of selling people. Of course, we know that's triggering for Black Americans, because we know that Black Americans were also sold on the auction block in these United States of America. And we are still living with the horrific ramifications of slavery. Slavery in America is still impacting American life today in so many ways, despite those who claim that it is over, done with, and forgotten. It is not. The legacy of slavery, the implications of it, the housing patterns, the educational developments, all of it is still very much impacted by the slavery that Black people endured in America. Contrary to American slavery, however, slavery in the Bible was different. Now, I think slavery is wrong across the board. In the Bible, it was a different kind of slavery. It was more of an indentured servitude, if you will. And what I mean by indentured servant is an indentured servant is someone who is sold into the service for another, but with the understanding that eventually that indentured servant, slave, can work his or her way up out of slavery and become a free person. That's very important, because that's the kind of slave Joseph was. Obviously, he was not confined to the caste, C-A-S-T-E. He was not confined to the caste, because a caste is a hardened class system. It's a class, but it's one that you can't break out of. There's no mobility out of it. You're there. You're stuck in it. And for Black people, back in the 1800s, of course, before slavery was quote unquote abolished by the Civil War, we're talking 65, 67 or so. And even then, it was replaced by segregation. But the point I'm making is that contrary to slavery in the Bible, slavery in America was much worse, in the sense that if you were Black in the 1800s, before the Civil War, living in Georgia, which is where most of us are right now. I know some of us are in different states, but even if you're just anywhere in the South for that matter, being Black meant that you could never work your way out of slavery. You were born into slavery and you stayed there. Only on very extremely rare occasions would masters grant their servants liberty, or what we call emancipation, but that was very, very rare. Most people were born into slavery, died into slavery, and not only were they born into slavery and died into slavery, their children were born into slavery, died slavery. And all of the interactions between white people and black people, by the way, to be in America, black, slave. In Joseph's case, he angered his brothers and so forth. And so, it was an unfortunate, you can say, set of circumstances. It was wrong what his brothers did. But in America, all you had to do was just be black, period. And you were a slave. And you had no way of working your way out. None. Even if your master, what they called masters, we have only one master, that's God. But even if the right person on whose plantation you worked liked you, maybe they liked you to the extent, well, as I say, even if they liked you, legally, they were not allowed to set you free, not legally in most instances. And even if you were unfortunately in most instances raped by a white person, even though your children were mixed race, then your children were still slaves. And I think if you want to read more about that, you want to read about Thomas Jefferson and his black mistress and the children that they bore, the mixed race children that they bore, and how those children were treated in the 1800s. Even with a white father as prominent and as powerful as Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of America, even Thomas Jefferson, that's not to say he could not have done more, but legally, what you going to do in Georgia? Legally, a white person cannot. A black person cannot marry a white person legally. That didn't change until the 1970s. Legally, black people could not live in certain areas. Legally, black people could not buy property. Legally, black people could not educate themselves. There were laws against reading, education, all of this. So my point is that slavery in America was much more brutal, much more evil, much more horrific, much more inhumane than any slavery we've ever known. The slavery in America. It was based solely on race. Based solely on race, with a misunderstanding, by the way, that went back to what we studied when we talked about the curse of Ham, and really Ham's son. It goes all back to that, and we discussed that earlier in Genesis. But it was horrific, it was horrendous, and we're still dealing with the negative ramifications of it today as a nation. And we wonder why America has so many race issues. Well, it's because America was built in racism. That's why. It was built. Black labor built the nation, free black labor. And by the way, America ought to be wealthy, because anytime you get 300 years of free labor from the people, you ought to be wealthy. And America is wealthy because of black labor. And not just black labor, black blood, black bodies that were all sacrificed to promote America. And then giving black people unequal rights, if any rights at all. So I gotta lift that up, because slavery is triggering. It's triggering for me. It ought to be triggering for you. Not just if you're black, but if you're a person of conscience. You start talking about slavery and people being sold like chattel. By the way, American slavery was called chattel slavery. Animal. It's like animals. They treated black people like animals. And in some cases, they still treat animals better than black people in America today, if the truth be told. Because you ain't going to get away with shooting a dog in America. But if you shoot, 5 or 6 black folk, well, yeah, you're going to get arrested, you get in trouble, but they ain't going to take guns off the street. And I think there's unfortunately, the understanding that with more guns, black folk will just shoot each other. And I hate to say, but I think that's what's happening. Black people are shooting each other. And so there's no pressing to get guns off the street because black lives don't matter that much. And if we want to kill each other, fine. The legacies of slavery. So in Joseph's case, being sold into slavery did not mean that his life could never be lived as a free person. Whereas in America, if you were black, that's exactly what it meant. But not in Joseph's case. And we're going to see that as we read his experience. So he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer, captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master, that would be Potiphar. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. So apparently he saw some initiative, he saw some drive, he saw some positive ingenuity in Joseph. Now, you would think that having been sold into slavery by his brothers, it's kind of hard to get yourself back together and get back on track to the extent that you become a positive, productive person after experiencing a trauma like that, being sold into slavery by your own brothers. That was highly traumatic. And Joseph could have showed up in Egypt as a basket case, because people have just about lost their minds over things far less than having your siblings sell you into slavery and tell your parent that you are dead. That's pretty serious stuff. Being sold into slavery, and then the daddy whom you love, you're separated from him, and he's told that you're dead. So not only are you jacked up, your daddy is grieving and you love him. And he's old, and he has to suffer that grief that his beloved son has allegedly been killed by some wild animal. The only thing left is his multicolored coat. You would think that's enough. That's enough. Now, let me tell you, far less things have happened, and we get jacked up. I mean, we just can't even hardly function. Because, these traumas, these stresses are real, and you're not always able to bounce back. When, you're suffering through a trauma, you're not at your best self. You can't produce. You can't really focus on work. You're just not yourself. You're out of sorts. Trauma. But not Joseph. Joseph goes down into Egypt after having suffered through this terrible trauma. And the scripture says that Potiphar noticed this, realized that the Lord was with Joseph, gave him access, gave him success in everything he did. So it's amazing how resilient oppressed people have to become. I mean, look at all that Black people have done in spite of our oppression. By the way, we're getting ready to celebrate Juneteenth. Juneteenth was originally a celebration. I want to say it originated in Texas, but all because in 1863, I want to say, I'm a history major, but it's been a while since I read through and studied it. But 1863 or so, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by then President Abraham Lincoln. And the word went out that on January 1, I want to say 1863, declaring all slaves in America, in the American colonies and American states, or formerly Confederate States of America, all slaves were to be set free. And Black folks stayed up New Year's Eve, 1862 to 1863. Somebody can check me on that historically. I'll check it. Most Black people got the word that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed, but not black people out west. Now, I don't know if it was because it took a while back then for the word to spread across the country, or if it's because there was a deliberate attempt to keep black people in bondage in the West. So they have black people working as slaves, not even realizing that the president of the United States had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So black people in Texas, for instance, didn't get the word until what, like June? Yes, Juneteenth. So black folk were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, or emancipated by the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863. Black folk in Texas didn't get the word until June 1863. And that's why we celebrate Juneteenth. And so many people, Juneteenth is coming up, is usually like the 17th or 18th or so, 19th of, some of y'all know about Juneteenth. You can tell me the exact date. I want to say it's 17th, 18th, 19th, around there. Or some people celebrate it for several days, but it's coming up. We know it's one of those teams, 17, 18, 19 of June. So what's that? Next weekend or the weekend after that? Coming up pretty soon, right? The weekend afterwards. And there's going to be concerts and celebrations. And many black people in America celebrate Juneteenth as Black emancipation and July 4th as white emancipation. By the way, when white people were celebrating their independence on July 4th, 1776, they were celebrating their independence from British rule. So America became an independent nation, July 4th, 1776, the birth date of the nation. Black folk at the time who were in America and slaves in America, many of them said, "Oh, wonderful, white folk free." And that was their way of saying, white folk free, we still in slavery, so we have nothing to celebrate. That's the way many black people felt. That's probably the way you and I would have felt in 1776. Fireworks, celebrations. What's the hoopla? Oh, America just won independence from Great Britain. Well, it must be white America, because we in America, we black and we ain't free. So many black people see Juneteenth as black, as the celebration of black emancipation, black liberation, and July 4th is, celebrated for white people because they were about the only ones free in 1776 in America. So anyway, this gives you a little history there coming up. And my point I was making is that black people have been astoundingly resilient despite all of the pain, dehumanization, brutalization, plunder, rape, exploitation that we've experienced in America. We yet remain resilient, creative, and pretty much positive. Most black people aren't sitting around bemoaning slavery. As a matter of fact, there are many black people who think we ought to forget about it, even though we cannot forget about it because its implications still impact us. Its ramifications still impact us today. So, but many black folk, like for instance, Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, my home state, who's now running for president, running for the nomination, for the presidential nomination in the Republican Party, Tim Scott. And if you listen to Tim Scott, like many black conservatives, Tim Scott and many black conservatives think, oh, we ought to stop talking about slavery because it's over. Clarence Thomas, it doesn't matter anymore. But there are those of us who are aware, who are woke, which is not a bad word, because the opposite of woke is to be asleep and to be oblivious to what's happening. So I'd rather be woke than be oblivious. It's a different philosophy, but black folk have done amazingly well. And we still remain positive because we still work, we still create, we still go to school, all of that, in spite of the horrific experiences that we have had and many black people continue to have in America. Yes, because racism is not dead. All you have to do is, ask the parents of black people who've been, killed by aggressive police. Talk to families of black people who've been falsely imprisoned, put on death row, because black people had little voice and no legal means to represent themselves in legislature. I mean, look, just talk to black people and they'll tell you racism is still alive in America. Talk to the professional black people who are trying to buy homes in certain areas and find out, or sell their homes. And they tell you that, if they find out that you are black and you owned your home, you're going to get less money for it just because you were black. That's been proven. There's statistics that prove that. If that's not racism, I don't know what is. And it's still happening today. Black people are still underrepresented, still underserved, still treated as dispensable. And I think Barack Obama and Oprah, who are supposed to be the exceptions, both of them would agree racism is still alive. If you're paying attention and if you're woke and not asleep and oblivious. So, like black people in America, Joseph, even after being sold into slavery, remains positively engaged and lives his life on a note of positivity. I can't overlook that because traumas, disasters, debacles, 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 the disaster, a calamity, they happen in our lives. And if we are not careful, if we are not prayerful, and this is no insult or put down on people who are dealing with serious mental illnesses as a result of the traumas in life that they have suffered. That is very serious. We have to take that very seriously. And we have to try to make certain that resources are available to help persons. The point I'm making is that Black folk have been so amazingly resilient. And to this day, we still are among the most loyal people who serve in the military. I mean, you name it, Black folk have paid the price to support America. America has not supported Black people all the time. America has not. But Black people have. We fought in every war, shed blood. My uncles who fought in World War II tell the story of fighting in World War II, coming back to America, fighting to defend, by the way, America overseas in World War II, fighting in, European arenas there, Normandy, other places, and then coming back to America and being called a nigger, being treated like dirt, after putting your life on the line to defend America. So Black folk have shown up for America. America has not always shown up for Black people, is my point. Yet, Black people are among the most resilient, creative. Yes, I'm proud of being the Black man that God made me. And I want to say that, Black folk have been the most resilient, the most committed, the most dedicated people on the planet to this day. And so when you think about the resiliency of Black people in America, think about Joseph, because he also was very resilient. We might have gotten inspiration from reading the story of Joseph for our own experience in America. That Joseph did not allow, even being sold into slavery, to make him lose his zest, lose his zeal, lose his positive approach to life. Now, of course, there's a big difference. We can't forget, Joseph had the opportunity to work his way out of slavery. Black people, you could work your fingers literally to the bone and still be a slave, not only you, but your children, and for that matter, your grandchildren too. So different, but I think the point can still be made that after being traumatized and going through great stress and tribulation, we got to have something in us that gives us the power to stay positive. because Joseph's positive attitude was his salvation. If he had given up, taken on a negative spirit, been bitter, vindictive, if his focus had only been how I'm going to get my brothers back, he would have never seen doors open for him in Egypt the way they did. So be very, very careful, my brothers and sisters. And I think something we ought to pray about all the time when we go through tragedy and storms is to ask God, now, God, I need my joy back. Because do you know that the joy of the Lord is your strength? It's not just the fact that you survived through it. The fact is, did you survive through it and yet maintain your joyful, positive, productive spirit? Because if the enemy can break your spirit, the enemy has broken you. And Joseph apparently had something that would not let him give in and relent despite his calamitous circumstances. And that's what you and I have to pray about. Because I just think some people are just going through the motion. They checked out. You know, you can be physically present, but checked out. You can be looking at somebody, but you ain't studying about what they're talking about because you basically have checked out. And that becomes very damaging to our progress. Joseph. Genesis, again, 39, I'm in verse 3. Potiphar noticed this. Notice what? He said, notice how successful Joseph had been in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. So apparently he did a good job. He was conscientious. He followed through. He was honest. He was positive. He was a blessing to the household of Potiphar. A blessing. And you can't be a blessing if you are going around bemoaning your plight all the time. You can't be a blessing to yourself. You can't be a blessing to others. Well, I don't know why it was me. Well, you know, none of us really know, but it was. So make the best out of where you are and keep moving forward. Because if God is for you, God is more than the world against you. I want to look at that text because I want you to put a note on that. If God is for you, if God is for you, God is more than the whole wide world against you. Bible. Romans 8:31. Look there with me, please. Romans 8:31. Let's look at it. What shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Now, you can call some names of some people that can be against you, but the point is that they don't stand up to the favor of God. That the favor of God in your life is greater than any negative forces, any destructive forces, any evil that comes against you. We say it, but it's hard to really hold on to it, especially when you find your. See, I want you to really see. Joseph was the favored son of a wealthy Middle Eastern person. He was wealthy. He went from that to becoming a slave in a foreign country. That had the temptation must have been there for him to just say, well, you know what, just forget it. But his faith kept him. His faith kept him positive. And our faith ought to keep us positive. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to go to therapy and counseling sometimes. But I'm saying that your faith in God, your basic belief that, I'm in a situation here, but, God has given me a vision that my life is more than this. He still had that vision that, his brothers would bow to him. Didn't know how it was going to happen. God didn't give a roadmap to how that was going to happen. But Joseph held on to that. And that let him know that despite all that he was going through, God had a purpose, God had a plan, God had a place for him, his faith. And if he stayed faithful to God, and if he stayed positive in life, that God would bring it to pass. Now, when, how, where, he didn't know, but neither do you or I. But you stay faithful. You stay positive anyhow. Our ancestors used to sing in the slave fields, working from sunup to sundown, working their fingers to the bone, picking cotton for the white man in the American South. And they would sing, over my head, I hear music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. And where you get that kind of positivity from when you're a black slave in America, and there is no chance of you ever being able to escape your plight. No chance of it. Unless you're a runaway slave, in which case you got to face other kinds of dangers, like being caught, recaptured, and then beaten and sent back into slavery, which is probably, if you got caught and sent back, matters would be worse. That's not to say that many blacks didn't take the chance anyway and steal away down by the river. Steal away to Jesus. I ain't got long to stay here. That's all a part of black people's marvelous brilliance and creativity. That was really telling black folk, get down to the river, because Harriet Tubman getting ready to lead passengers on the Underground Railroad. And by the way, you meet down at the river because if you in the river washes away tracks and scents. So the hound dogs can't pick you up once you get down to the river. Gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, study war no more. And I mean, that was just one of many songs. But that would let black folk and white folk think, that's nice. They're going to have church down the river. Well, actually, they didn't like that either, because anytime black folk got together and white folk weren't there to monitor and see and hear what we were doing, they knew that something was up. So they didn't like that either. But, down by the river meant Underground Railroad. And black folk understood that. If God be for us, who can be against us? Do you believe that? If you really believe that, and I really believe that, then we have to make that our focus in life, come what may. And Joseph had already been given the vision of what God had planned to do with and through his life. And he never gave up on it. Just like when God appeared to his grandfather, Abraham, his great-grandfather, Abraham, God gives the word, and God says to Abraham, stay faithful. I'm going to give you this land. And don't know how any of that's going to happen. But trusting and believing in God pays off when you learn how to wait. Now, it's not easy. And you got to have a roadmap in life. That's difficult. But God's word is true. And God does deliver in God's own way and in God's own time. Back to Genesis 39. Potiphar noticed that I'm in Genesis 39 and verse 3. Potiphar noticed this, that is, noticed how successful, how positive, how energetic, how Joseph took initiative, got stuff done, did a good job, didn't have to be monitored, was, all of that went into it. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph. Potiphar there's no record that Potiphar even believed in the Lord. But, when people see the difference in you and me, it lets them know God must be real. Because they see the evidence of God's work in you and me, and they see it in how we handle difficult, depressing circumstances. See, they ain't just listening to us talk about, oh, I love the Lord. That's not what happened. Joseph didn't go down and say, oh, let me tell you about the God I serve. Joseph did the work. Joseph remained positive through pressure. He held his head up. He held on to his integrity. He held on to his faith. He held on to his sense of personhood. And Potiphar noticed that. And that's what made Potiphar say that the Lord was with Joseph. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph. Because apparently, having been dealt a heavy blow from his being in slavery, even that could not stop him from being positive, from being faithful, from being engaged. And that's what lets people know what you're about and lets people know what I'm about. You can talk about Jesus till you blue in the face. But the question is there any evidence that you have faith in Jesus in how you handle difficult situations in your life? How you handle disappointment, how you handle disaster, how you handle haters. That's the evidence in how you handle them, how they impact your thinking and your attitude. Some people have been hurt, and they've been hurt for the rest of their life because they will never let you forget how hurt they are. Do you hear what I'm saying this evening? Some people have been hurt in life, and you will never forget it. They will never let you forget it, how hurt they are. As a matter of fact, every conversation you have with them just about is, let me tell you how they did me, and let me tell you what I had to suffer through, and let me tell you all that I had to go through, and they didn't like me, and they did me wrong. And every conversation, every opportunity is always on all of that. Rather than picking up the pieces, thanking God for the life that you have left after your disaster, and moving forward in faith, believing that if God is for me, God is more than the world against me. Now that is what will make people pay attention, take note, and say to themselves, even if they don't go to church, don't believe in God, there's something about you. There's something about you that lets me know that God is real. Something about you. Something about how you handle this disaster. Something about how you were knocked down to the ground and got up without bitterness in your heart and vindictiveness. Something about that lets me know that God is real. And that's the kind of testimony that we want to give. It's the testimony not just in what we say, it's the testimony in how we live. And none of this is easy. None of it is easy. Get slapped in the face and still turn around and say, God bless you. Get pushed down to the ground, lose your privileged status as the son of a wealthy sheik in Israel. All of that, and then here you are down as a slave in Potiphar's house, doing a good job to the extent that you get recognized for your outstanding service. Must be a God. Must be a God. Who would be able to live through that and still come out positive and productive, except somebody whose life has been touched by the Holy Ghost? You want people to pay attention? Stop talking so much and just let them see how you live. You want people to know that your God is real? Let them see how you come through situations. And by the way, if they ask you, tell them it's God. My God is the one who's keeping me. Despite all that I've been through, my God keeps me. And I still have joy. Because joy is not the absence of pain. Joy is the presence of God. Joy is not the absence of trouble. Joy is the presence of peace that passes understanding. Do you hear what I'm trying to say tonight? Potiphar noticed. Potiphar took note. Potiphar wasn't even a believer. But Potiphar said, there's something about this young man, 17 years old, by the way. Joseph is 17 years old. Something about him. He's working around, he's successful, he's diligent, he's dutiful, he's positive, he's productive. Something about him. And he's a slave. Something about this young man. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. I'm finally getting to verse 4 because these verses are packed with spiritual meaning, and I can't rush through them. I won't. Lest you get to the next verse and miss your opportunity to walk in God's favor rather than wrangle in your misery. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. So he's elevated. See, with a positive attitude, you can't, as we often say, the cream will rise to the top. See, everybody think they can do it. No, because most people can't stand this kind of pressure. But even in a position of slavery, indentured servitude, to be specific, Joseph continues to excel. Verse 5, I'm still in Genesis 39. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Jacob's sake. See, that's how God will work it out. That's how you know God is with you. Because with all the people try to do to destroy you, God will use you to bless people anyway. With all that people and haters and the devil has done to destroy you, God still uses you. And they can't understand it because they have absolutely no use for you. They could just as easily kick you to the curb. And they've done it. And here you are still serving, still walking in God's favor, still believing that if God is for me, God is more than the world against me. So I'm not going to be defeated. I'm not going to be sad, mad, and I'm not going to walk around bitter. Even though I have a lot to be bitter about, I ain't going to do it. Even though I have a lot to be sad about, I'm not going to do it. Because when you lead with sadness and bitterness, you can't make any progress. And the question is, do you want to make any progress, or do you just want to talk about how bad you have had it in life? Or do you want to make progress, or do you want to just stay stuck on how people did you wrong? If you want to make progress, you're going to have to lead with something other than, let me tell you what they did to me. You have to lead with something other than that. You have to find a way to ask God for strength to hold on to the promise that God has given you to work all things together for your good. And that's exactly what God is doing for Joseph. God is working it all. Romans 8:28, working it all out. That's right there. We just read that passage in Romans. If God is for you, God is more than the world against you. Romans 8:28. God works all things together for our good. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You got to believe it. You can't just sing about it and say, oh, that's nice, and think about it every now and then. You got to take that thing to heart, believe it, put it in your spirit, write it into your consciousness, and whenever the enemy tries to convince you of something else, you come right back to that. My God is able and I'm living in God's favor. And it doesn't matter what people say, think, or do. If God is for me, God is more than the world against me. That's what will open doors for you. It opened doors for Joseph. He made Joseph his personal attendant, which, by the way, was a way of saying that Potiphar trusted Joseph more than he trusted anybody else in his whole household. And one thing he said about Potiphar, now he was a weak man, we're going to see that in just a minute, but he was also quite perceptive. And with all those other being the wealthy, prominent, Secret Service official that he was, I want to say Secret Service is what we would call it, but in those days, it wasn't Secret Service to guard the king. It was a position of privilege, the guard, Pharaoh's guard. With all of that, here comes Joseph, and Joseph gets promoted and elevated over everybody else, which lets us know that Potiphar trusted Joseph more than he trusted anybody else in his own household, in his whole household, and Joseph had just gotten there. But when you find honest people, because most people just aren't. I hate to say it. Most people are not honest. Most people will lie. They will steal. When you find somebody who's honest, hardworking, you want to quickly draw those people as close as possible. Because ain't no telling what them other jokers doing. And obviously, Potiphar recognized talent. He recognized honesty. He recognized hard work and ingenuity when he saw it in Joseph, and rewarded Joseph for it by making him, giving him charge over his household, which, by the way, was quite extensive, with Potiphar himself being a wealthy man. 5, from that day, Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property. The Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake, just as the Lord will bless. See, this is what I believe. I believe that if you're a child of God, the Lord is blessing the company that you work for your sake. If you're the only one praying, trusting in God, God will intercede and bless them to put you in position. The Lord blessed Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. People talk about church people. People make fun of Christians. People ridicule believers. And they don't even know that the reason why their company is still open is probably because some believer works there and is interceding for that company daily. Because when you go to work, if you're still working, you get up and you say, God, touch me, touch my coworkers, touch our company. Keep us safe. Don't let a gun shooting break out. Don't let arguments derail us. Bless us and keep us. And see, God honors those prayers. And everybody else may be unbelieving, unchurched, immoral. And God will step in and bless the company just to take care of you. That's how God does it. And I'm sure there are people today who don't realize that they're living on grace. They're living on somebody else's intercessory prayer, somebody else's intercessory petition to God. God blesses Potiphar for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly. Your business still in the black? Somebody praying. Somebody trusting in God. The president might not believe. The president don't even know he being blessed, she being blessed. Because there's some prayer warriors in the employee staff. And his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing. Trust, honesty, integrity. Everybody, I'm telling you, I don't know why people, well, I do know people just want to get what they can get by any means necessary. And they will lie for their own convenience and steal too. If given the opportunity, they will steal, even at the church. So when Potiphar saw how honest and dependable Joseph was, Potiphar said, the rest of y'all step back. He's in charge now. If I ain't talking, listen to what he says. Verse 6, so Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't have to worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. Notice he gave Joseph complete responsibility. Even though Joseph was a slave, Joseph had complete responsibility. That would not have happened in the 1800s in American slavery, because black folk, even though we ran just about everything, had to do the work. White folk made all the decisions. So black folk did the grunt work and had no administrative responsibility. Hardly, well, I know recognizable in terms of a title. I mean, even think about black people who worked in the big house on the plantation. They weren't in charge of the house. They just worked there. They served their slaves. But white folk ran it. Not in this case. Potiphar puts Joseph, gives him administrative charge, which means Joseph is the second in charge of the whole household. That's what makes this slavery much different than the slavery that our ancestors endured. Let me go on. I'm still in verse 6. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man. And Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. Come and sleep with me, she demanded. So he gets sold into slavery. Potiphar recognizes his hard work, his diligence, his industry, his honesty, puts him in charge. Okay, thank you, God. It's not ideal, but I'm thankful, because as a slave, look at where I am. Look at where you've brought me. Things are going pretty well up until Miss Potiphar. Looking at this young man and start singing, I want me some him, Miss Potiphar. Eight, but Joseph refused. Again, speaking to his integrity, his honesty, his sense of spiritual identity, to know that as a child of God, if you have trusted God and you believe that God has delivered you to a certain place, why would you get to that place and forget about God? You trust God, you pray to God, you say, God, help me through. God, give me strength. God, this is a lot to bear. I need your help. And God does that. God shows up, gives you strength to get up, gives you a mind to focus, gives you a spirit to stay productive and positive. And then you get in that position and forget the God who brought you. That's what could have happened when Miss Potiphar threw herself at Joseph. It speaks to Joseph's level of integrity and maturity, because he's only 17. And, I can tell you, as a 17-year-old, I can talk about boys and men, because I'm one. I don't know about women, but 17-year-olds, boys, men, they looking for opportunities to have some sexual experience, to sow their wild seeds. Most, not all, but most. But some have a discipline that goes beyond their bodily desires. And not only did Joseph could have done what some people do. He could have slept with Miss Potiphar and justified it by saying, "Oh, this will endear me to the household, maybe." And if I've got her in my corner, she can help me advance as well. I just say that in reference to the people who do sleep in order to get ahead, who do sleep with people in order to get ahead. You do know that works. You do know how that works, right? That people do have sex as a means to promote themselves economically, financially, materially. You do know that. Sex is a part of that bargain, not in every person's life, but in many people's lives. Sex is a part of their ascent to the top. In fact, we've heard that term. Oh, she slept her way to the top. Or he slept his way to the top. We've heard that. 17-year-old trying to get his life back together, realizing what he's left behind in Israel, the privilege, the wealth with his father. Now he's in Egypt. Well, hey, I got to do what I got to do because I got to make it. That's how people talk. That's the way people think. Well, I got to make it. God understand. I got to do what I got to do here. But I need to make it. I need to make it out of this situation. And I've already won the favor of Potiphar. Now his wife is after me. As long as she can keep this thing on the down low, I can have a good thing going. Because by the way, she got money. She got a little change too. And if she, can keep putting in a good word for me to Potiphar, ain't no telling where I can, ride this situation. But at 17 years old, Joseph refuses. And he says to her in verse 8, Joseph refused. Look, he told her, my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. I have a sense of integrity. I have a sense of self-worth. I have a sense of value. I've been entrusted. Now, what he could have told her, which she probably wouldn't have understood, is more than the trust that I've established with your husband, there's a trust that I have established with my God. And I'm not going to let the one who brought me thus far down, namely God. And she persisted. Some people don't take rejection. I don't know what it is. But anyway, she persisted. It makes you so uncomfortable when people approach you and you tell them, but they don't give up. They keep coming back at you, especially if it's especially if they try to proposition you to do something that's illicit, immoral, untrustworthy. And they just keep coming at you with that, as if they're going to wear you down. 8, but Joseph refused. Look, he said, my master trusts me with everything in his household. No one here has more authority than I do. Another way of saying your husband trusts me more than anybody else in this house. And apparently, she's a liar and a deceiver and a manipulator. So Potiphar probably knows who he's married to too. She was probably just, beautiful. She was probably just a trophy wife. But obviously she didn't have much integrity. And I keep throwing this out at you because I keep wondering, can you really live with a person, know a person, and not know that they are a dog, a scoundrel? Can you, people totally shocked? There's no indication, no clue, nowhere, or were there clues that you missed because you weren't paying attention? Was this proposition on the part of Mrs. Potiphar? Was this an aberration? An aberration is something that is totally out of the norm. Aberration. That's a good word. An aberration. Is this an aberration or is this a norm in terms of her personality? Now, I want to argue, and you can give me your opinion, but I'll tell you what I think. I think that when people do something that drastic, when people proposition people to do illicit, immoral things, and not just one time, but over and over and over again, that is not something that is alien to their character. That is something that they have probably tried before. It just never worked. And there was probably something about her character that even let Potiphar know that, she was not to be trusted. But in her position and for PR, public relations sake, Potiphar is not going to go against his own wife, even though Potiphar, I believe, because I don't think people just switch overnight like that. You can tell me what you think, but like I said, you mean this person did this and you had no clue, no idea, and you've been living with this person as a spouse, not only just living with them, but living with them as your spouse, and you had no clue? Really? Maybe that's why she wasn't in charge of the household, because the Potiphar couldn't trust her. All right. Verse 9. Genesis 39, verse 9. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you. Of course, that's understandable, because you are his wife. Everything else is giving me free rein. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God, and there it is. That it is our faith in God that gives us our moral direction. Aside from what the law says, aside from what we can get away with, aside from what might indeed advance our careers and give us more bank, aside from all of that, how does it impact your trust in God? And in making moral decisions, I don't think many people even get to that point, because their faith has been so pushed to the background. And they've gone through so much hurt that they think they somehow are justified in doing a few things wrong to get ahead. They've suffered so much pain that they think they are justified in doing a few things wrong just to get ahead. Not so with a person of true faith. Trust God, you trust God totally. And you don't believe God to get you to a certain point, and then once you get there, decide you're going to live life on your own terms, or live life according to what's convenient, or live life according to what is self-promoting for you. So Joseph said, it would be a great sin against God. I'm not going to do that. 10, she kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her. And he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around when he went in to do his work. For all we know, she could have sent everybody out the house and said, I just want him to be the only one in the house. We don't know. She might have came up with some kind of plan like that. But one day, however, no one else was around when he went in to do his work. She came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, come on, sleep with me. Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. When he saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. Look, she said, my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. By the way, that was the put down, Hebrew slave, that term Hebrew. You got to keep in mind that the Hebrews were barely, they were a large clan, but they were not a nation. And they were not any, people that people looked up to. The Egyptians were the ones who were at the top of the socio-political ladder. The Egyptians, this was a time when Egypt was one of the superpowers of the world. Egypt, Northern Africa, Egypt. So Hebrews, come on. Hebrews. And by the way, he brought this Hebrew slave in, not just a slave, but a Hebrew slave. That's a put down on the Hebrews. He brought this Hebrew slave into our house and to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, he ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me. She's concocted this whole scheme, pulled off the boy's clothes, got his cloak, and uses that as some kind of evidence that he came to rape her. She kept the cloak with her until her husband came home. Then she told him her story. That Hebrew slave you brought into our house tried to come in and fool around with me, she said. But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his cloak with me. And as I say, Potiphar was perceptive, but I can't give Potiphar a pass on this because Potiphar didn't even give Joseph the opportunity to explain his side of the story. And even if Joseph had said, well, no, she's the one who's been coming after me, Potiphar being the person in a powerful position in Egypt as he was, would have risked his own political position had he believed Joseph instead of his wife. Even if Potiphar had said, you know what, I've never known Joseph to act like this. He's been serving, he's been working here. I've never known him to steal anything, never noticed him to be honest. I've never noticed any of that. So, okay, let me see. I hear what you're saying, baby. But now, can we just hear from him? He didn't even do that. There's no point. Because even if Joseph says what she says is not true, Potiphar then has to decide, am I going to believe his word or the wife of my wife or the word of my wife? And in the public eye, two things. You always pick the word of your family member over others, which is a form of nepotism and blindness to everything. But, you defend family first. But the second thing is, his wife is an Egyptian. Joseph isn't. So it would be like a black person being accused of raping a white person in the 1950s and white people believing the black person's testimony instead of the white person. We know that did not happen. All a white woman, or for that matter, any white person had to say is, well, they tried to rape me. And that was it. A black person was going to get lynched. A black person was going to get arrested and probably lynched for the accusation of a white woman. Did you see, by the way, there's a great movie out called Rosewood? Rosewood. I want to recommend that to you. If you have not seen it, I can't think of the actors offhand, but it is a powerful movie. It's about a black town, I want to say in Florida, that was burned to the ground after a race riot broke out between blacks and whites. The town was black. The white people came in, leveled it, laid it to waste, all over a false accusation. A white woman claimed that she was raped by a black man. Actually, she was raped by a white man, but was somebody who she was fooling around with. And I don't know if she was raped. She was just having sex with the man, and the man beat her. That's what it was. And then she claimed that the black man came in, raped her, and beat her, when it was a white man who did it, and she was having sex with the white man behind her husband's back. But anyway, that accusation set off a race riot that destroyed a whole town of people. Devastated it. I want to say the movie is called Rosewood, and I want to recommend it to you. If you have not seen it, please watch it. Please, please, please go. You can probably get it on Amazon. It's one that I don't know. People don't collect CDs anymore, DVDs, but I'm sure you can get it digitally as well. You can probably get it, online. Just look it up. Rosewood. Oh wow, what a great way to celebrate Juneteenth. How about watching that movie with your family and friends in celebration of Juneteenth? I think I'm going to do that. Rosewood in celebration of Juneteenth. Let's watch Rosewood. a testimony to Black resilience, Black faith, Black unity, in spite of the horrific, brutal, inhumane treatment that we have suffered through in America. Rosewood, by the way, I'll say this, how time flies, but I'll say this. When you watch Rosewood and listen to Senator Tim Scott, the Black senator from South Carolina, who is now running for the Republican nomination to be president of the United States. See, Tim Scott would say, oh no, Black folk need to just get over themselves, get over their experience, and just move forward, because in America, all doors are open and you can just do what you want to do. All you got to do is work hard, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let me tell you, if you watch that movie Rosewood, you will see a town of Black professionals, beautiful Black families, beautiful Black people doing their work, prospering, doing well. But a town, despite its Black industry and ingenuity, that was destroyed by white racism. So it is not true that in America, all you have to do is work hard and you can get ahead. That is not true. Because the Black folk in Rosewood did the same thing that Black people in Black Wall Street did in Toledo, or what is it? Not Tuskegee, what is it? Oh, Lord. Not Toledo, Ohio, Black Wall Street. Somebody's going to give me that name. It's out. I don't know why I cannot remember the name, but let me finish this point. Rosewood is what you want to watch. Black Wall Street, somebody look it up right quick and put it on the screen, Black Wall Street. But in both instances, Rosewood and with Black Wall Street, Black entrepreneurship, Black industry was destroyed because of racism. So it is not true that all you have to do is work hard in America. That is not true. Because all them Black folk, not only did they work hard, they were also very successful. Tulsa is what I'm talking about. Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Look that up too. There's probably a movie about that somewhere. I don't know, but you can certainly probably get some footage on it. But the movie Rosewood, I want to highly recommend that. Get your hands on that movie, or at least pull it up digitally. Rosewood. Black persistence and Black survival. Despite false claims of racism. Okay, I think my time in terms of talking to you is just about up. I need to hear from you. Any questions or comments that you may have about this evening? Let me just put this up by Zawadi Eaton, because I think that if I can, maybe I can't. There it is. So Sister Eden says Rosewood, Florida. Yes, it's a small, peaceful town with an almost entirely African-American population of middle-class homeowners. These are hard workers. These are not people who don't want to work and just live off the government. These were middle-class homeowners until New Year's Day, 1923, when a lynch mob from a neighboring white community storms the town. Among the carnage, music teacher Sylvester Don Cheadle is in it. That's one of the actors. Don Cheadle and mysterious stranger man Ving Rhames, that's another actor in it, excellent, stand tall against the invaders, while white grocer John Voight, who's also very good in it, acting, attempts to save the town's women and children. The film is based on a true story. Isn't that something? 1923 is when this town, yes, New Year's Day, 1923. Thank you, Sister Eaton. Rosewood, get that movie, please. Get it, watch it. As we prepare to celebrate Juneteenth in these United States of America. All your comments, questions. I think I've taken most of the time tonight. But if you have any questions or comments, thank you, Sister Teresa Tull. You identified Tulsa, Mother Grinnell. See, Mother Grinnell lived through a lot of that. So she knows Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Darlene Bonner says it was Rosewood. Watched it this week. Yes, honestly, Black families were very prosperous. I think you mean white men were angry because Black man had a piano in his home. Boy, yeah. I mean, it is such an interesting movie. It will move you. It will move you in so many ways. I think it moved me. I'll say that it moved me in so many ways. Because you get angry, at the way we were treated, but you also take such pride in how we are able as a people to keep moving forward despite everything that's been thrown against us. And yet we remain resilient. And it is not in small part. Well, let me just say this. The reason is because Black folk have a faith that is indomitable, cannot be defeated. Now, I can say that moving forward, I don't know, because we don't know how to go to church anymore. I don't know about our faith moving forward. But from getting thus far, it is our faith. We've come this far by faith. Leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. He never failed me yet. Oh, can't turn around. We've come this far by faith. We have come this far by faith as a people. We would never have been able to make it by faith. Now, moving forward, I ain't so sure. I'm worried. But I know thus far we've come by faith. Comments, questions? By the way, I'm worried because Black folk, we seem to be losing our sense of spiritual, moral, Christian value and commitment in so many ways. And the evidence of it is in our raising generations of young people who don't even go to church. Young Black people who know nothing about the church, the Bible, Jesus, nothing, because their parents have decided that it's more important to put them in ballet, football, basketball, cheerleading, and buy them a car for their graduation instead of bringing them to Sunday school. They think all those things are more important than bringing their children to church and giving them a spiritual foundation, generally speaking. Yes. Please watch Rosewood. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to watch it again. I've seen it several times. I'm going to watch it again to remind me of our resilience. Any other comments, questions while we're preparing to move Rosewood? Yes, Power White. Thank you, Brother Davis, for reminding me of that. Let's do some watch parties for Juneteenth, Rosewood. Let's do some watch parties. How about that? So please don't forget victory in your prayers as well as in your financial support. You know, all of our ministries are brought to you because of your prayers and because of your financial contributions that make all of our ministries possible. So please continue to give as God blesses you to give. And thank you for remembering your church and your pastor. And God willing, see you at church this Sunday. For those of you that can make it, look forward to seeing you as we continue to move forward, having come this far by faith and trusting God's grace to lead us on. God, we love you and we thank you for this evening. We pray that your blessings will be upon us. We pray, dear God, that you will give us the strength and the resilience that we need to press on despite adversity, calamity, even disaster. Thank you for the faith and the grace that has brought us thus far. Now strengthen us. Be with us, guide us, and direct us in the road ahead. We honor you and we love you and we bless you in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you, family. Till next time. Hello, Deacon Ingram.
Hello, Dr. Samuel. Something really is going on with my system because it would not let me end the broadcast as I normally do.
Oh
I
wow.
had to just click out of it, which is why we disappeared and able to like we usually do at the. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.